Hey guys, it's Jen with Mad Prepping, and tonight we have the privilege of having Engineer 775, Scott Hunt, with us, and he's going to be educating us on electromagnetic pulse, or also known as EMP.
Hello, Jen. It's good to be with you, and I'm looking forward to the show. I know it's taken us a while to get together on this and do this, so hopefully I can answer the questions that you might have, and we can discuss everything that's going on, maybe current event-wise, talk about the subject of EMP and how it might affect us as a society, and then what can we do to mitigate the threat of an EMP. So first we need a little bit of an education on what electromagnetic pulse is, and it needs to be broken down into two different areas. There's nuclear, and there's an EMP that can be caused by the sun, which a lot of people call it a solar flare, but that's not the case. It's what will follow the solar flare, and that's a coronal mass ejection, or a CME. So you have the nuclear component. So let's talk about that a little bit. So with North Korea, and basically there's 5 nations in the world right now that probably could cause an EMP. The United States being one, Israel, Russia, China, North Korea, and we've had eyes on Iran for a while. And so, the scariest thing is people today, you don't need to be able to hit your target. You just need to be able to launch something and detonate it. So that's the insidious component to an EMP. I don't need to be accurate. I just need to put something in the atmosphere and detonate it. And that's been proven to cause disruptions to our electrical systems, whether they're handheld devices or whether it's the grid. So when it comes to a nuclear, I guess I'm just jumping in here and saying, picture or imagine, and a lot of your fans and guests will probably know this, that if a nuclear device is detonated in the atmosphere, that there's a disturbance that happens that causes a wave to come towards the Earth in different frequencies and different components. And I'm just going to break it down to E1, E2, and E3. E1 is it's a super fast, there's going to be no warning, and it's going to be this super high pulse, and they're rated in kilovolts per meter. And I don't want to get too nerdy on this, but 50 kilovolts to 200 kilovolts per meter is what would come from a nuclear detonation, and how it works in our atmosphere. And it would basically line of sight induce a pulse into anything that it comes in line of sight with. So if you're holding your phone and you're walking around and it's a nuclear, it can couple with the electronics in that phone and fry it. A laptop, it doesn't need to be connected to the grid even. It's so powerful that it can take out any electronic device that it can couple with. So when I talk about coupling, I'm talking about, picture a wire in your hand, a long wire, and a magnetic wave coming across that wire. What happens is that a current is induced in that wire, and anything on the end of that wire can get fried. So whether it's a transistor, a transformer, a FET, anything that's on a circuit board. Everything in our world runs on printed circuit boards. We don't like to think about it or know, it's nerds that run the world, but that's all behind the scenes. We don't want to really, admit it, but, everything that we have in our homes, in our cars, every device that we have has some sort of printed circuit board. So that nuclear blast can induce an EMP, an E1 wave, that it's a wave that it's very high. If you Google the electromagnetic spectrum, you'll see from X-rays to cell phones to microwaves to FM radio to AM radio, and EMP is a huge wave. And in this, there's different waveforms and frequencies, and I don't want to drive you crazy on this, but the nuclear is the most insidious because there's no warning. It happens. There's a detonation. You don't hear it. You don't see it, and all of a sudden, there's electronic devices that are fried. Then what follows that is an E2, and E2 is comparable to lightning. So imagine a lightning strike across the entire country. Lightning can take out a lot of things. So you have not just the nuclear component, but you have the second wave, which is comparable to lightning, and about 30 kilovolts per meter, and that could fry a lot of things. I deal with a lot of solar systems and houses that get hit by lightning. It fries anything. It can fry computers, it can fry anything that's electrical, garage door openers, nuisance errors. And then there's the E3 wave, which is this long, sustained wave that can couple with our electricity grid, with our utility grid. And that's that's when a nuclear EMP is very comparable to a solar EMP event, a CME. The solar EMP is that E3 component. It's like 5 kilovolts per meter, but it's huge, it's massive, and it's sustained. And if that hits the grid, which we have millions of miles of grid of wire conductors, then transformers at the end can fry. So I'm not trying to scare anybody, and I don't do what I do to motivate people to do stuff out of fear. This is just the facts of how an EMP works. So a nuclear event and a solar event only compare at the E3. The frequency and the wave and the duration are very similar, but there's been a lot of damage already done with a nuke. Now, if the nuke doesn't get high enough in the atmosphere, there might be local disturbances, but if it gets at least 25 miles above, 25 to say 300 miles above, and that's why we're watching, we see North Korea able to launch what? A satellite. If they can do intercontinental ballistic missiles, then they can launch things. We know they have 2 satellites that cross our country twice a day. So you have, you know, if there was a device on a satellite and they detonated it from Earth when it crossed our path, then it could induce an EMP. So that is kind of the scary thing that people, you know, it's like, what in the world? What if they had that capability? So do they have the capability? I don't know. But it is not, they don't have to actually come here and fight us with nuclear bombs. They just have to launch something in the atmosphere and detonate it. That's why people are on edge, because if they've done a little bit of research, they know that that's the problem. And that's why, you know, rogue nations, you know, this is what's called asymmetric warfare. People that can just, they can't actually fight a war against a superpower, but they can do something like this. They're just throwing rocks, right? But this rock is a nuclear.
Yeah, and it's not like we have to have boots on the ground. I mean, boom, you do a vertical launch up from the Gulf from a container ship, and bam, you're back into the 700s.
Exactly. And so there's a lot of, you know, when you mention container ship and the ability to move it into place and launch it above our, you know, our contiguous 48 states and get it into the atmosphere and set it off. I mean, you've got a problem. We are so dependent. Electricity for what? Transportation, for fuels, for communication, for, you know, for pretty much everything.
Well, our kids would actually die without these. So, you know, this.
I think we would. I think we're getting to the point where we would die without them too.
Yeah.
We're getting pretty dependent on these devices ourselves, I'll have to admit.
Yeah. We're all becoming pretty socially unacceptable with these things. So yeah.
So there's let me just say there's 2 events that have already happened that give us a precedence and understanding of how EMP works. There was a Starfish Prime, a nuclear explosion test done in 1962, which greatly affected radios and electrical devices on the island of Hawaii. Okay, that's been documented. Just Starfish Prime, Google it, look it up. That's a nuclear blast, and the EMP, again, it was local. It wasn't set off in the atmosphere. It was set off out in the ocean, but it still induced this localized EMP. The other is the Carrington event from 1859, which was a solar event that coupled with telegraph wires and caused fires. People were injured. But those were in a society that wasn't very technological. And so if those 2 things would happen in our culture, with our technology, with our infrastructure, it would be a totally different situation. So there are, the science is pretty solid on what an EMP is, what can cause it, and what damage it can cause. There are a lot of myths about what to do to beat it. You know, what can I do? You know, I don't have, you know, the Air Force's budget to build Faraday cage. What do I do to help myself or my loved ones or my neighbors? So we can talk about some of the techniques that to mitigate an EMP. And so I don't know, you know, so it doesn't, to me, it's, yeah, North Korea is on the radar now, but it could be Iran tomorrow. It could be ISIS, funded by any one of the proxies from China or Russia, who knows?
Yeah, pick a terrorist, any terrorist.
What's that?
I said pick a terrorist, any terrorist.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So that's what's scary, is that, you know, we are so dependent upon electricity. So if a CME happened, you know, back to the solar events, which is just a natural event, and the key is it Earth directed? And you get these, I don't know, there are solar flare alerts, the Goddard Space Center, NASA, solar weather, and you can get alerts sent to your phone, emails, texts, whatever. If you want to know, it's like, oh, there's an X X1.5, and it's earth directed, and it's going to tell you, if you have put some things in place or you haven't, you need to do it now, because it takes 1 to 4 days for a CME to actually reach the earth. A solar flare will get here in, a matter of minutes. It's traveling 93 million miles, but it gets here pretty quickly. The CME that follows the solar flare takes days, thankfully, to get here. It's just a massive plasma. And when it hits the earth and goes across any conductors, that's when transformers can blow. And the weird thing about that, it's not weird that we've done this. We've shopped out all of these transformers to, guess who? China and Germany. So the high energy transformers in our grid is East Coast, West Coast, and Texas. And when it goes down, we've had a couple of little things this year where it's gone down, right? I mean, it's like, what happened in New York and San Francisco at the same time? Electrical subways going down, just, So, are people testing the grid and looking for weak spots? So a solar event would really wreak havoc on our grid. So we would be fighting.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I did not really realize that there was a difference between a CME and a solar flare, and there definitely is. So I guess it's the solar flare that's almost like a zap, almost like lightning. It's going to happen almost immediately, whereas the CME, you've got some time to prepare when you're hearing about things.
Yes.
And when we're looking, I know we've heard of the Carrington event, and I know back then we were talking about how it destroyed the telegraph wires and whatnot, but we are so dependent and our electronics are so sensitive now. I mean, if something like that happens, you watch the War of the Worlds that was with Tom Cruise, and when you see the vehicles go down, I know there's certain things that would affect the vehicles, and then there's something else that would just hit certain things. And so what could we look at between the two? Is there a difference?
Yeah, there's a difference. Most studies have shown that anything under 300 feet in length, a CME will not couple with. So a vehicle is typically safe in a solar event, okay, because it's under your home is small enough where it can't couple. The danger in a CME or a solar event, a natural event, is the grid taking out transformers, which is bad because it takes out electricity.
Which your home is connected to, so you're still going to have issues there.
You're still going to have issues, but it's not going to affect vehicles. It's not going to affect your cell phone. It will affect the cell tower. That's why the ham radio operators come in and they start, right. And the solar flares are always picked up by ham radio operators, anybody that's a pilot, and it affects navigation systems. So they're kind of like the early warning detection systems, because they're like, we can't communicate that something's going on. That's solar flare. That's like instantaneous. The CME that's coming is just, it's coming, but it might not be earth directed. You have two spheres, and you've got this emission going in, it can go in any direction. It's when it comes directly at us that we have the problem, that we're susceptible. So I hope that kind of explains the difference between a nuclear, which has an E1, E2, and E3 component. The CME has just the E3 component. And so it's lower frequency couples with long conductors. A high frequency that nuclear couples with short conductors. So just think of your phone as small. That's what the nuclear can take out. The solar will take out the grid. The nuclear takes out everything. So unless it's protected or hardened. And then we can talk about what that means to harden or protect, or to Faraday cage, to try to protect yourself or your equipment that you deem as, I've got to have this. Let's talk about, I don't know if you want to do that now. We can talk about how to protect those things. Or do you want to, are you good on the EMP theory, or do we need to go?
That's I have learned a lot from that, Scott. Thank you. You are just so knowledgeable and amazing in all this. How did you get started in this, and what have you been doing with it?
Well, that's a big question. How I got started in it is I was invited to be part of a group, and I didn't quite know what they were up to at first, but they recruited me to help them design a community that would be EMP hardened, that they could basically, and take this model, once we had this model, this prototype, and then sell it or share it with other groups. So on this task force, the leader of it It was actually the noaaprojects.org, and you can look that up. And there's a whole board on there. William Fortune's on it, Newt Gingrich, Sid Morris was really the spearhead, the man that led it. And so I was invited to the team to take, and we started with a prototype cabin up in the mountains. And we tried to, what can we do to produce, to make it a sustainable community, grow our own food, have our own power, have our own water and security, the whole 9 yards, and be able to survive through a nuclear EMP event or a CME. And so during that time of being on that task force and me sharing from a mechanical engineering standpoint, mechanical things that like, this is EMP proof. This technology that I am offering you was from the 1700s. It's not going to be bothered by an EMP. You know, stuff that I've been playing around with, helping other people for years now, you know, that I have on my farm that's working right now. An EMP could go off and it'll laugh at it. There's just nothing electrical about it. So
yeah, like a wood gasifier.
Gasifiers, exactly. There's another gasifier, hydraulic ram pumps, all this technology from the 1700s and the 1800s that people don't know about or have just forgotten, or it wasn't as efficient as electrical. I love that stuff. So I brought that to the table and we started to implement those things. At the same time, Sid would bring people into our conference, into the meetings, and they might be from academia. There might be from the military, Cynthia Ayers from the Department of Defense, Peter Pry from Impact America. And we had, you know, William Fortune was on there, Newt Gingrich was on the board. See, there's a lot of people in the government that have tried to bring this, elevate this problem, and know that everybody that gets shot down. They know about it. They just, so it's been kind of frustrating. So this group, I learned a lot, and some of the main takeaways were from their testing. Again, it was this 300 foot, that was a big deal for me, that anything under 300 foot wasn't really going to be a problem with a CME. Mm-hmm. And so that helped us a lot in our design and not to be so concerned. The other thing is that a lot of the cars are hardened. They're a lot tougher than people give them credit for. You know, during, you know, one testing phase in the EMP Commission, they tested 34 vehicles and only one did not work after being blasted by an EMP. A lot of them all had nuisance failures, windshield wiper relays, lights didn't work, but the car would actually turn the key off and it would start and it would still run. So the car, so the older the car, the better, had more metal on it, had some inherent shielding effectiveness against EMP. Not all of them were perfect, but they were tougher than people thought they would be.
Well, and that's the whole thing. And this is why I love talking to you about this, because, you know, you hear so many different things. And of course you see the whole movie, like I said, the War of the Worlds or whatever, and there's only certain vehicles that run. And I've always heard, what is it, pre-1970s? That you're
it's pre-1970s on gas vehicles, and it's even more than that. It's because you're dealing with, even pre-1974, people would say, you know, you still have an alternator in many of those vehicles, which has diodes in it and it can fail, and voltage regulators can also go out. So a lot of times, you know, those older vehicles are cool, but you know, they're not practical in terms of families that want to carry their gear. If it's their bug out vehicle and they want to get to the mountains, they're so tiny, they can't carry much. And, you know, if it's just you and your husband and you don't have kids and you don't have, you know, food, or that's fine. And you already have it, you're already set. Then you can take the old Jeep from 1965 and head out. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times it's just not practical. I like the kind of the pre-90s diesel, mechanical fuel injectors, a diesel, and diesel's a lot more forgiving. It can run on a lot more things. And if you're, you know, diesel doesn't need electricity really to run. It just needs water to stay cool. It doesn't use electricity to run. It uses compression. That's another whole thing where, you know, you can use a lot of different fuels to make that diesel vehicle run. So a lot of people zoned in on like a 1984 Chevy Suburban or a Trail or a Blazer, a military type vehicle from the 80s. That's a pretty good, because it's big, it's four-wheel drive, can carry a lot of gear, carry a lot of people, and that's kind of a neat bug out vehicle. You know, there's a lot of people ask me about bug out vehicle, and it all depends on where you are. You know, An electric golf cart might be an awesome bug out vehicle for you. It carries a lot. It's quiet. You know,
How
there's
far
a
you
lot.
want to go and how fast you want to get there.
Exactly, but it's better than walking. You know,
True,
it's
yeah.
better than walking. So anyway, I got into this the EMP part of preparedness through this task force based on what I had already done in helping people get water and food and hot water and sanitation. And so I applied all those skills to the task force, and we implemented those things. And I got to listen to all the experts that are out there, and they parroted and they said a lot of the same things. So at least there was a witness. And then there was, you know, there's actually people from the military that build, they have crews of welders, and they build Faraday cages to STD 188-201, 202. There are military specifications for building Faraday cages. And so I got to kind of pick their brains, like, what are you guys building? And, you know, they're just building these, basically, we'll kind of jump into Faraday cages. That's how I learned about them. They're, you know, just picture the best Faraday cage is a watertight vessel that is conductive, a conductive watertight vessel. So just picture a metal sphere, and anything in that sphere that isn't touching the sides is going to be safe from an EMP, because when an EMP hits it, it can't get in. It's just can't. You have all these free electrons from the pulse, from the explosion, from the sun, and they're just coming at us. Okay, just a bunch of free electrons, and they try to get in. And if they can couple, they will, but they can't couple a conductive enclosure. Michael Faraday proved that in 1836, and that's where the Faraday cage comes from Michael Faraday, who was Einstein worshipped Michael Faraday. Einstein looked up to Michael Faraday as a scientist, as a, the inventor of the DC motor, and he did amazing experiments. And the Faraday cage was where he actually got inside a Faraday cage, and they blasted it with all sorts of static electricity. And he was like, "See, I'm fine." And
Wow, forget Houdini. We got Faraday.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
If you look up Michael Faraday's great education, and you'll see why he was very impressive. But so that's where the cage concept comes from. It's really a conductive enclosure, and what it does is it just knocks down. The whole goal here is to knock down the pulse to a level where anything that's inside it can accept that level. It doesn't have to take it to zero. It just has to knock it down. It's called shielding effectiveness. And it lowers it makes it so that printed circuit board can handle it. So it's rated in decibels. You think about decibels as sound, but the shielding effectiveness is, if I can get it below 50 decibels, then I'm safe. Anything inside that is not going to be destroyed.
Wow.
So, so the Faraday cage concept is really simple. You know, a lot of people just start off as simple. You take your cell phone and wrap it in aluminum foil. You wrap it in aluminum foil. That's a great Faraday cage. If you don't think it's good enough, wrap it again. And if that's not good enough, wrap it again. So you can put non-conductive material between the wraps. And so what you're building is a conductive enclosure inside a conductive enclosure. I always tell people, you know what the Russian nesting dolls are? You got to start with a big Russian nesting doll, and then you have the smaller one, and they're one inside another. If you can do that exponentially takes up your level of protection. So when I tell people, I don't know if you can see it,
like bubble wrap or cardboard, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, anything that's non-conductive, bubble wrap, cardboard. I have, I'm gonna make some noise here. I don't know if you can. This is my baby Faraday cage.
I have one in those basement that I have no idea what I should do with it.
This is the poor man's Faraday cage. This works very well. But the key to this, I take this, and this is a small one, and I put it inside a larger one.
Oh.
So this is my small Faraday cage. That's lined. And I have the big Faraday cage. Okay.
That's what I have.
Okay. So you can, but if you see, I have components. So let's just take a component that's very important to me. And it's saying, what in the world is that?
What in the world is that, Scott?
Okay. All right. So for me, the ability to be able to charge batteries after an event using solar energy would be very important to me, because I'm an infrastructure guy, and I'm like, okay, if I have electricity to make ice, I'm behind me is a freezer that I make ice off the sun with. So that could be refrigeration forever. that kind of thing. So if I can charge batteries that can run that DC freezer, I'm in good shape. So I put things in my Faraday cage. It's cardboard lined, cardboard top, and so nothing is touching the Faraday cage. Then I take that whole little Faraday cage and I put it in a bigger Faraday cage. And so what that did is really exponentially, when you call your phone, if your phone's in there, you're never there's no record of a missed call. There's no record of a missed call. There's no record, period. The other thing I use to test the cage is an AM radio. The AM frequency is a better test than your cell phone. Again, if you search the electromagnetic spectrum, you'll see off to the left, AM is farther down the spectrum than cell phone. Cell phone's kind of right around microwave. And so what I tell people to do, if they can, and there's one in their town, to go to they're going to be like, they might be arrested for looking weird, but you take your Faraday cage to a 50,000 watt AM radio station. I have one about 20 miles from me, and I will go over there. And that's a very strong AM radio station. I think the strongest in the country is 150 watts. This is 150,000 watts. So the closest, strongest one I have is 50,000 watts. So if I don't get an AM signal inside of my Faraday cage next to a 50,000 watt AM radio station, that's kind of my DIY redneck test that anybody can do that test to prove, they're like, oh, I made a Faraday cage out of Christmas cookie tins, which is a good Faraday cage, by the way. Any metal box enclosure with a tight lid makes an awesome Faraday cage. So you don't have to, Christmas tins make an awesome Faraday cage.
Wow.
And you can test that by going to an AM radio station, if your AM radio will fit in there, and as long as you don't, like, it's playing well, and you put the lid on it, and you go next to that station, and if you don't hear it, that's good. I'm not talking about static. I'm talking about actually hearing music or talk.
Okay, so you take an actual radio that you have, turn on
Yep.
that station, and we've got one 5 miles from us. So,
Right.
well, let me ask you this, because like I said, we've got that aluminum garbage can down in our basement. Could we put that inside of a plastic one and it would help? Or
Plastic doesn't do anything.
Metal, or does it not matter?
No, the only time the non-conductive material, plastic, cardboard, bubble wrap, that is just separating what you're trying to protect from the actual enclosure.
Okay.
Like if you didn't put any of that in there and that cell phone was touching the side of the Faraday cage, you're probably going to fry the phone. Okay. So the plastic didn't do anything for it other than isolate it from another Faraday cage that you could have put it in. So
okay,
the plastic,
so you have an exterior metal and then
exterior metal, then plastic,
interior metal.
Yes, you can keep layering it. That's why I always bring up the Russian nested, the doll thing. You lose some space, but you've greatly increased your protection. So those are but again, and let me just clear, we're talking about nuclear when we talk Faraday cage, because a solar event isn't going to affect anything that I can put in this Faraday cage.
That's true.
Nothing.
You're talking the E123 as opposed to the E1.
The E3, right? The E1 is going to get that kind of stuff. The E3 is not. So
right.
when I talk Faraday cage, it's only related to what we're talking about with nuclear. But there are things in my cage that I want. I have, communication devices, security devices. If you want to, I put an old laptop in. I've got data, thumb drives. What's important to you might not be to me. For me, I've got chainsaw ignition modules in this thing so that I can pull it out if it ever fried my chainsaw, I could pop a new one in. Mm-hmm. And this is something you have to practice too. I've done this on video and actually, taken the chainsaw apart, put a new ignition in that was in my Faraday cage so that I could actually do that. Why would I want to do that? Maybe,
never know.
I have a gasifier. I need wood, right? I want to drop
trees to protect your property.
Absolutely. I want to drop trees across the road or something like that.
Well, and what are some good basics? I mean, I know, like you said, it's very personal to each different family. However, what are some good basics to have in a Faraday cage?
I think basics are, records, having, something, whether it's on DVD or if it's on a jump drive or a computer that is capable of, even an external hard drive, something where you've put all your personal information, your important information, photos, everything that you can think of that you could store digitally, put it on these devices, put it in a cage. They don't take up any room. And so I'd start with personal identification items and critical information, put it in there. Then if you use radios, like if the cell phones go out and I needed to communicate, and if I needed to communicate with you and you're a couple hundred miles away, we might be able to do that for a short period of time through repeaters, or if we're really cool and we have high frequency rigs, we could talk to each other, but only if I've protected my radio and you have protected your radio. So a lot of what goes in a Faraday cage is a backup to what you already have. You already have this equipment, you're using it, it might fry. So that's when you go pull out what you have in the Faraday cage. If you have a vehicle that, if you've got a Jeep and you're like pretty handy and you can change out an alternator, then there'd be an alternator in my Faraday cage. There'd be a voltage regulator in my Faraday cage. That
now,
can stay.
ask you real quick, when you're talking about Jeep, is that something that's going to be time specific that needs to be pre-whatever? Or is this something where we can protect an alternator and we can get a 2007 Jeep Wrangler going?
Yeah, doubtful on the newer ones because of the computer control on everything. Anything that is electric, a lot of times your accelerator doesn't actually connect to anything. It's wireless now. Everything's controlled, electronically. So there's all these position sensors and things that'll fry. So you are better, the older the better. There's just that's why I go back to the old diesel. A newer vehicle, I know I have newer vehicles for work because I travel a lot, and I'm just like, it's not going to make it. So,
and that's good to know, because we are so enslaved to our electronics. Be it the cell phones or our nice, 2009, 2017, whatever. And these are things that people need to be aware of and consider, because you're not going to be able to jump into your everyday ride and go drive it, much less get gas for it. So
it's hard to experiment unless you're really good mechanically. I've experimented with my tractor. I've actually made my tractor EMP proof. It's a modern tractor, and I've bypassed everything so I can throw a switch and start it and run it, because everything works mechanically. All the electronics I bypassed, and I didn't know if it was going to work. And so I just said, I'm gonna do this, because it's a very useful piece of equipment. I mean that. With 10 gallons of fuel, I could go 50 miles, and I sure would rather drive that. If I had to take somebody or carry something, I can, it might be a little slow, but it's faster than walking. So, and then, we could, I don't know if, I don't want to, a lot of people, just having a bicycle, I met some people that, I've told them, go to Tractor Supply and buy that little Baja Warrior that's out front. It's brand new Chinese motorcycle, but it's EMP proof. You can start it. It's got a 200cc motor on it. It's comfortable to ride, and it would take you probably 50, 60 miles on a tank, and you got there. And the little, so that's, you're not spending a ton of money. How do you want to bug out? Do you want, it'll carry a lot too. You could pull a little trailer with the thing. There's a lot that you can. We had a brainstorming session at the last prepper meeting in South Carolina about, everybody has an opinion on what the bug out vehicle should be. It comes down to, can the person fix anything? And I just told this one guy, he's like, I don't know how to fix anything. I said, I've got it. He told me where he had to get to and how many people. I said, here's the Baja Warrior. It's $500. It's brand new. Can you pull the cord? That's all. Can you pull the cord and start? So
even us domestically challenged could handle this.
What's that?
I said, so even us domestically challenged can handle this.
Absolutely. If you can, they're easy to start. I have one. I use it to chase my son around on his little dirt bike, and it works great. So that's a great bug out vehicle. If I had to get out, I tell people to stay where they are, prep where they are. But if you have to go someplace, then there's some options that you just don't be thinking I have to have that pre-1970 vehicle to make this work. You don't want to be out on the road, period, in some critical times. So, I might want a little more of a stealth off-road vehicle, like maybe a motorcycle or a golf cart, than I would a big old car.
Well, and actually that's something that hubby's brought up, and it's more in line with a dirt bike as opposed to a motorcycle, but that's something that you could do quick trips on. If you're looking at something like that with a dirt bike, are there any suggestions or recommendations for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's why the Baja Warrior, because you can drive that off-road. It's so
Oh, so this is truly like a little motorcycle
It's
as
a little motorcycle. It's like a little mini bike. Yeah,
okay.
it's motorized. It's a cheap mini bike, and it'll get the job done. It's EMP proof. Hard to beat. Motorcycles are great. Old dirt bikes, four wheelers. You
Mhm.
know, I would be more inclined to a four wheeler because I could carry a lot more gear.
You mean like an ATV or
Yeah,
what they call? Okay, all right.
yeah, yep.
They're also those are a lot more expensive too. I've been out to our local Honda place, and you
Yeah, you
can
don't have to buy new.
fix it.
I
And
bought yeah, but I bought mine for $400 and I've had almost 20 years out of it.
wow,
People always buy new stuff. The old Hondas are bulletproof. I have a 1988 and a 1990 and they're awesome. I use them on the farm every day. So
that is
you don't have
amazing.
to buy old stuff.
That is just absolutely amazing. Well,
Yeah, don't go out and buy the $8,000 ATV just because they're cool.
no, well, they're really cool, but you know how I like to save money too. So,
So yeah, go buy the old stuff. It'll be closer to EMP proof anyway. So what else can we talk? I mean, we've talked about EMP, CME, mitigation, Faraday cages. So what you put in that Faraday cage is just what you think, what you want to protect. It might be different than me,
right, right.
In my book, I have the top 25 items that I have in my Faraday cage. I describe it in the DVD as well. And
Well, and
so
that's something else, Scott, because I on Mad Prepping and us through Mad the T Show, we like to share the love and how can we connect from you? What can you provide for us? And how can we catch up on the DVDs and the books and everything else
yeah.
that you offer? Because you have so much to offer.
Yeah, both of those are front and center on my website, which is practicalpreppers.com. So you can go there, and there's a DVD that the Prepper Project guys and I put together on starting with some of the simple things we've already talked about to how could I take a building and make it a Faraday cage? How could we do what the military does? The military hardens their equipment because they have to fight during a nuclear disaster. Well, how do they do that? Well, the equipment designed by Honeywell and the rockets, and they're all hardened. And what I mean by that, the circuitry has been protected against these high frequency pulses. But in the civilian world, we're not protected. And that's the big, that's the reason that the NOAA projects got going. It's like, why can't we take some simple concepts from the military and apply them to the grid? Why can't we take, and the technical term is shunting this just picture a wire and you got this strong pulse coming down, and instead of before it hits the transformer, you shunt it, you take that out of the loop and run it to ground. That's a simple concept in the electrical design world, and that could be applied at a state level. And so part of that task force, they wanted to get North Carolina hardened. They were going to, let's just pick North Carolina and let's just go for it. But it's lost some traction. People, Fox News did a big thing. Judge Janine brought up, EMP and all the experts in the government, congressmen and senators that were behind it, and it got a lot of traction. Then I got my 2 seconds of fame on there on the show talking about EMP, but it just fizzled out. It's sad to say it'll probably take some sort of event that will hopefully just a localized event that will be like, wow, the grid was taken out, and this is real. But
and two things I want to throw out there. Somebody has told me once, if you put some kind of cover over your newer vehicle and had some kind of chain going off the back end, which we happen to have a hitch on one of ours, and basically there was some way you could fashion something to protect the newer vehicles because it would shield around it.
Yeah, I mean, well,
is that possible, or
it hasn't been made. Arthur Bradley is another great resource. He talks about it a lot, having a vehicle cover. You got fancy vehicle covers, right? Yeah. Picture that cover being a Faraday cage. It was just manufactured as a Faraday cage. There isn't one on the market that I know of, and I think
I don't know how to seal that. I don't know how it could be sealed or be possible.
You would drive into it and zip it. You could. Oh. It's a giant Ziploc bag.
For a Highlander, great.
Hey, they make EMP bags, right? I mean, I sell Tech Protect bags. They start little small bags that take your cell phone and up to, I can put this whole, computer inside them. And they're Ziploc Faraday bags made to a military specification. So it's just scaling it up to a car. The thing you mentioned about the chain and off the back, and I'm thinking that's kind of a grounding method. You know, there's a lot of theories on should I ground my Faraday cage or not, and I'm in the not category because that grounding conductor can also, once that EMP hits the ground, and if it's still going, and if it finds any conductors underground, it'll couple with those and come in. So your grounding technology could bring the EMP into your system and fry it.
Wow. And honestly, when you use the whole nesting
Yeah.
thing that you were talking about, that really made a lot more sense to my estrogen-based brain than what I've ever heard of in years. So, this is what I love about you is you can bring it down to, EMP 101 or EMP for Dummies and just help us understand these things. And, honestly, I know we've talked about CMEs. I know we've talked about EMPs. If we're looking at different events like this, how long do you think that we could be out of commission? I mean, we know we don't manufacture anything in the country. So
we would be out of commission for way too long. We'd be out of commission beyond what most people have prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
We get into 1 to 2 years, you're really going to test, the numbers of fatalities are crazy. The statistical studies of 80-90% die off at a year. So I just hope it never, ever happens. EMP is the worst thing. When people say, what are you preparing for? I tell them, if you can prepare for an EMP, you're way ahead of the curve. There is an item I've been installing I wanted to share with you. It's the Solarc. There's 5 engineers from Texas, and they approached me. They said, here's our EMP proof generator. And I said, yeah, right.
Really?
And I said, send me one. Yeah, I don't know. Can I share the screen on this thing just to show you a picture? Did that do it? Do you actually see it?
No, I do.
Okay. So this is just I don't know if you can see, do you see my mouse circling this thing? Okay. That is a solar EMP hardened generator. And I can't show, a picture doesn't do it justice, but I'm going to go back into the,
how big is that? I mean, what are you looking at being able to protect with something like that?
Well, what this thing is, it actually protects anything it's connected to, which includes the solar panels, the appliances. So say you want a washing machine, which is one of our number one. We want to have sanitation. We have a washing machine.
Yeah, I don't want to be beating rocks in the river.
Yeah, you're not gonna have a dryer, but you can have a clothesline washing machine. Would be awesome. If I have a lot of people coming to my house and we got to do laundry, that would be nice. So the Solarc system is a system. It's set up to protect the solar panels. It's set up to protect the unit itself, and it's set up to protect the appliance. So they took the military's approach, of not building a Faraday cage around all the components, but they use a technology that dissipates the EMP within the Solarc. And that's like when you can't put a Faraday cage around a jet, right? It's flying through and it's got to be able to, but that jet, you better believe, is hardened. All the electronic circuitry has been hardened. So they've hardened the circuitry in the Solarc, and they're protecting the solar panels. Solar panels are a lot tougher than people give them credit for. The problem are all the everything's attached to wires. If the EMP gets in the wires, it likes to fry whatever it's connected to. So they have special ferrite cores that are wrapped around the wires that send the pulse back to the Solarc unit. And that's what dissipates or knocks down the EMP to a level that's acceptable. If you go to their website, they have a video that shows them zapping computers and other inverters, and they fry. And they keep asking me, send us some more stuff because we keep frying. It's expensive to keep blowing things up. And their Solarc unit does not fry. And they're using 50 kilovolts per meter, which is comparable to an E1 blast from a nuclear device.
That's just a baby blast.
That's what?
That's just a baby blast.
That's a baby blast. Well, it's still a good one. And so I've installed several of these because a lot of people say, man, I really want to have electricity to keep my food going, to run a CPAP machine, a medical device, keep my insulin cold.
Yes.
Diabetic. So the Solarc is the only solution that I know of that can actually do those things. So I've got several people completely EMP hardened with a solar generator.
And what does something like that run?
Less than $1 million. It's
awesome. I'll take two.
All right.
Take a party out of state bad check. Not that I like that.
It is a portable generator. It has cords on it. So it isn't, you can do it basically configured in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. You're going to go from probably $9,000 to $12,000 for the unit, but you're getting 12 circuits in your house that you could run.
Well, and that's the whole thing, and that's where we need to think outside of the box and see what's going to be most important for us. Would it be nice to, if you're on a well system, would it be nice to flush your toilets? Absolutely.
Right.
Would it be nice to be able to have some hot water? Absolutely. I'd rather, push the button on the laundry machine than beat rocks in the river.
Right.
And so, like you said, you have to figure out what's going to be best for you and your family. And actually to know that it's under, like you said, $9,000 to $12,000, it's a lot of money, but it's less than a vehicle. Or think about all the money we waste going out to dinner and everything else that,
the cool thing,
you're set.
It is. One of the cool things about it is it's not a rainy day system. It's not something that, something went bad and I'm going to use it then. It is actually being used on a daily basis. So it is saving money on your power bill. It is taxed. It handles all the solar tax credits. Oh. And so I have a couple people
you're talking about it will follow under that.
Oh yeah. And I have several people that they're living completely off of it right now. So it's not a rainy day installation. It is an everyday. So I've got a couple that's living completely off of this. You met them at prepper camp.
Okay.
And I just saw them at the other prepper camp in Iva the other week, and they're doing great with it. They're completely off the grid with a solar, and they're ready. If an EMP happens, hopefully it won't, but they're good.
Excellent. Well, that's just so amazing, and it's amazing to see how technology has advanced towards these things.
Here's a whole new product that has come on the scene, and I was very skeptical. I installed it. I said, okay, as a generator, it works pretty good. This is what we do. And so I was pretty skeptical, and I blew holes in it and tried to find fault with it. And as it works, it does exactly what they said it would do. But I was like, I don't have an EMP gun. I can't blast the thing. And so they finally have some good testing scenarios and videos, and so it's the only thing I can offer anybody. If they have to have electricity during and before, during, and after an EMP event, this is the only thing that I know of that works. The other concept, the other way to approach an EMP or a CME is a plug and play approach. It's like, I've got this system. I know it's going to fail, and that's kind of my approach. That's why I have in my Faraday cage certain components. I'm like, all right, it's going to fry, but I know how to replace it. So I'm just going to pull that one out. That's toast, and I'm going to put another one in. So that is my approach when it comes to vehicles, my little small solar battery charging systems. I'm like, okay, it's fried. Who cares? I got a backup.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pull that out and I'm going to put it in. So I tell people that's one of a plug and play approach or a sophisticated approach. And I find people can grasp and afford the plug and play sometimes a little bit more than, because people they'll spend $50,000 on a solar system. And I'm like, it would cost $150,000 to protect it. And that's no joke. Nobody's going to do that. It's a waste of money.
Right. Well, and that's why I love working with people like you, because I know you have people's best interest at heart, and you're not just out to make a buck. I mean, you truly love people.
No, I love what I do. I mean, it's a ministry for me to help people. So, so all these things, the podcast, the YouTubes, the Facebooks, Instagram, that's just a way to share it. It's been awesome.
Well, and like I said, this is something I've preached for years, this is where we support the prep family, because I know where your heart is, and I know you're out there to help people, not just, make a quick buck on something that seems interesting or is a fad now, because it's not. And these are things that, some people may think it's crazy or tinfoily, but it is truly, it's not. It may not be a probability, but it's a definite possibility. And these are the things, and this is where hubby and I say, if we're prepared for zombies, we're prepared for anything. And, because it could be an ice storm or an EMP or, whatever, or a job layoff. I mean, we've personally experienced some of these things. And these are the things that we try to help people with, because, you've got different layers and levels of things that can happen, and some are higher
worse than others. Sure.
exactly. So, well, I really look forward to just learning so much from you, Scott. We've learned so much tonight, and you've been able to bring it down to where, the basic Jane Doe, John Doe can understand it.
Good.
I just,
I hope that was the goal. If
no,
we
and
need,
that's good because there's so much that we need to learn. And when I look at some of this stuff, it's like, I don't have an engineering degree. I can't do this. But you know what? No, through learning through people like you, yes, we can.
yeah, we covered very simple things: aluminum foil and trash cans,
Hey, I
and
can do that.
everybody can do that. And
Right.
put some simple mechanical. If you have a well, put a pump in it.
What
It's
kind of pump?
a hand pump,
Like what
simple
kind of
pump.
pump?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's. I mean, I'm not trying to a shameless
No,
plug for
I want
products.
to be able to promote you because I know where your heart is, and I want you to throw out everything to
Well,
everyone that we
the
can
number
help.
one thing that I started this whole ministry job, whatever I am, as with water, getting people water, because if you don't have water
I have
at
that.
your location, you're out of there. You're not going to be able to stay. So a lot of people that have wells and springs, and we do rain catchment, but a lot of people that have wells, they're in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina. Um, they have top discharge wells. Their plumbing comes up out of the well. So even though they have 1,000 gallons of good water down there, if the power goes out, they can't get it out of the well. So they're
Mhm.
stuck. So now what? So there's a couple pumps, and I use the simple pump, and I've installed 350 plus of them around
Right.
the country as a way to get water out of your well and also deliver that water through the existing plumbing system, pressurize the tank. You can send your hubby out there to pressurize that bladder tank. You can take a shower, and you did that mechanically. It's EMP proof. So the hand pump on a well is a wonderful, simple thing. It's kind of my door opener to talking to people about preparedness. Okay, you've got water, you have peace of mind. If you never have to use this thing, great. But if you need to use it, there's 5 gallons of water a minute. It's pressurized, and you could live at this location. You didn't have to leave, or you didn't have to live off of open ground source like a creek or a pond or something like that. You can still use your well water and deliver it into your house. You don't have to carry it. It's not grandma's old pitcher pump from the farm. It is a nice stainless steel deep well water pump that I've gone down to 350 feet with it to get water. So it's an amazing solution for EMP proof, EMP mitigation, and just having water. Like you said, ice storm, who cares what it is? And I don't really focus on EMP. I just focus on solutions. And
Well, and even your basic everyday, we very rarely lose power. In fact, I think the last long-term that we ever dealt with was Francis and Ivan. That was probably about 10 years ago.
right,
And the area was without power for about 10 days. But we had an issue where there was an accident a few weeks ago and the power went off. We had absolutely no idea.
right,
And we were without power for about 12 hours. Well, I didn't think about it because when we have something weather related going on or something that you can actually look at and say, okay, this may actually be coming. I need to fill the bathtub so I can flush the toilets.
right.
You have certain instances like with an accident or
Yeah,
something,
you don't have time.
it goes out, you have no clue, and bam. All right, so you're going to be without power for 12 hours. Guess what? You can't flush the toilet. So,
So we'll just have to come up and we can put a hand pump in at your place.
yeah, we do. I think actually we've talked about it, and I'm sorry.
We talked about it. We need to revisit that,
Yeah,
but
do it.
we
So
could do that on podcast. You could film that, and
we could. That could be another mad prepping episode.
there you go. How to get water.
Absolutely. Well,
So
Scott,
that's a good mechanical solution for water. And so, did we cover enough, or do you need to cover some more? I can keep going, but
you know what? As always, you were awesome, and you have just got so much to share. And I truly look forward to just learning so much from you. And let us just be an outlet to help you.
sounds great. Well, let's do it again.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Guys, it's been wonderful as always. Again, this was Scott Hunt, Engineer 775. You need to follow him, and we're going to try to include some links and whatnot where you can see his YouTubes. In fact, Scott, if you would share with us how we can get a hold of you and also check into your products that you have to offer.
I appreciate that. Yeah, YouTube is my main outlet that I share with the world. It's Engineer 775. Just Google it, you'll find that. And I'm on Instagram as the same. I'm on all the social media. I'm addicted to it, I guess. So the LinkedIn's and the Facebooks, and then my website is practicalpreppers.com, where I just keep adding products that I have tested. I have a small farm that I've pretty much everything that you'll see on the website. I've tested, I've run. So it's what I think works the best. And then email is usually how people communicate with me. You can find it on the website, or it's info@practicalpreppers.com. And love to talk to you and maybe help you do that. We have a consultation service and I did one last night, yesterday in North Carolina. Just spent, usually 2-3 hours with a person, walk the property and look at things and just take a systems approach to preparedness. This is what you can do. This is what you should do, and put a whole thing together. So we're not just a solar company. We're not just a water company. It's a system. How can I give you the infrastructure that allows you to focus on the zombies, that
And
allows you to,
take care of your family.
everybody is clean, well fed, they're warm or cool, whatever they need to be, they're hydrated, and all that boring stuff is out of the way and secure. And you'll have to spend, you might have to spend time on securing your location, but you can do that better if you had a good night's sleep and you're clean and you're well fed. So that's my focus, is taking a systems approach. So we have a phone consultation and an on-site consultation service.
That's awesome. And hey, bottom line, keep in mind, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So,
There you go.
yeah.
This is true.
Well, as always, Scott, it's been amazing. Love and hugs to you and the family. And we just look forward to having you back and learning more.
Sounds good. God bless you. Thanks for having me.
Uh,
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.